Welcome to our second snow day video. This one will cover the love story of Joseph and Asenath as yet another response to the problem of Hellenism and how a Jew can live in a non-Jewish world, this increasingly Greek world of the 2nd century BC. So this is a YouTube video, so I guess I should say, hey, like my video and subscribe to my channel. But I think for attendance purposes, I'd like you to leave a comment so I know you were here, and tell me if you are going to go to Meijer today and get some snacks for the snow day. What would be your favorite snow day snack? So leave a comment, let me know your favorite snow day snack, and then I'll know you were here. So we're on page 33 of the notes, and I'm just going to talk about Joseph and Asenath for the next 10 or 12 minutes or so, and hopefully this is a book you probably know nothing about until you took this class, because it's not even in the Apocrypha. This is a book that's part of what's called the pseudepigrapha, falsely written, meaning they don't have authors. It's like not anonymous, but they're part of what are called expansions of the Bible. And so there's a little hint in the book of Genesis of the name Asenath and where she came from. And so Jewish writers decided to write a story sort of describing this. And so by way of introduction, this is a romance story. It is a story about how Joseph found his wife, his marriage to Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, who is in fact mentioned in Genesis. That's all that's mentioned, just that he married a woman, had 2 children by this woman. Now, this causes some problems for a good Jewish writer living in, say, 50 BC, which is often, 50 to 100 BC is the suggested range of dates for this book, is if Joseph was a godly Jew, he must have married a godly Jewish woman. How could Joseph marry an Egyptian, especially one who is, Potipharah is the priest of On. He is a priest. So this is a pagan man who has a daughter, and Joseph somehow marries his daughter. So these are sort of questions that some Jews had, and they wondered how Joseph could do a thing. There's another book I talk about sometimes in this class called Jubilees, which has these same sort of questions, like, why did Abraham, get the promise to, leave your land and I'll give you this land and make you into a great nation? Why Abraham of all people? And so they create stories that sort of fill in the gaps in the patriarchal narratives. In this case, where did Joseph get his wife? Pardon me. Where did Joseph get his wife is the motivation. There's another legend that is a little bit later, not very interesting, that tries to explain this a different way, is that Asenath was an actual Jewish girl, and eagles came and sort of snatched her up from her home in the land and carried her to Egypt, and she was orphaned in Egypt, and this priest took her in. So when Joseph married her, he was actually he really was marrying a Jewish woman. Well, that's not the angle that the book of Joseph and Asenath takes. In this case, it really might provide a little bit of an answer for how you respond to the growing Hellenism of the early 200s and the post-Maccabean period. Maybe the solution, instead of sort of competing with them intellectually, maybe you can convert the Gentiles and they can become part of the Jewish people, which is what happened to Asenath. The story really is more about repentance and Gentile conversion than it is about romance. As I say there in that first subpoint, from the perspective of this book, it's possible for a Gentile to really convert to Judaism. Asenath, I probably should delete that extra Asenath there. That's a mistake. It's a mistake in every video. But she's a pagan woman who, because of her love for Joseph, decides to convert to Judaism. So part of the storyline in the first 17 or so chapters of the book is that Joseph is risen to be second in command of Egypt. If you remember the Joseph story, this is after he's interpreted Pharaoh's dreams, and it's been several years into the good years, and he's now just this extremely powerful man in Egypt. And Joseph comes to the home of Potipharah, who's Asenath's father, and Asenath is introduced as sort of a snotty girl. I don't know if that's the right way to put it. She's gorgeous. She's beautiful. All the men want to marry her, but none of the men are good enough. And so whenever men come to, try to arrange a marriage with her father, she sends them away. They're all not good enough for her. And so Joseph comes to collect the grain from Potipharah, as he was doing, and he comes into the house, and apparently he is the most gorgeous man ever, and he just is dressed in these spectacular robes, and he just reeks of beauty. And Asenath, who's rejected everybody so far, sees him as just overwhelmed. Oh, this is the man for me. And so she wants to marry Joseph. What's ironic, though, is that Joseph won't have anything to do with her. In order for Joseph to have anything to do with this woman, she must first reject all of her idolatrous ways. She must completely convert to what we would call Judaism today, and that includes eating food that is unclean and food that's associated with idols. And so he says something like, far be it from my lips to touch the lips that have touched unclean food. So he won't even kiss Asenath because she's eaten unclean food. And so she is wounded by this. She's just devastated that this gorgeous man is rejecting her. And so she goes back to her bedroom, and she has a visionary experience. Before I talk about that, I do want to talk a little bit about this emphasis on eating food. We might say, oh, you need to convert to Judaism, and here you got to believe in Yahweh, or you got to believe in only one God, or, you got to, here's 6 doctrines you need to accept. As Christians, we tend to think of religion as believing certain doctrines. You have to believe in the Trinity or the deity of Christ and authority of Scripture, these sorts of things. Otherwise, you're not a Christian. In Judaism is more of a religion of things done. And so things like eating food that is unclean or eating food that is sacrificed to idols really would be more important than Asenath sort of learning, being catechized and learning the doctrines of Judaism. So this was a really important issue in the first century. Just to maybe attract your attention to the book of Acts, this is a burning controversy in the book of Acts. Should Gentiles who are converting to Christianity refrain from eating food sacrificed to idols? You get that in 1 Corinthians. You get that in Romans 14 and 15. You get that in the book of Acts with the Acts 15. Should Gentiles be circumcised? They say no, but in that letter that they send out to the Gentiles, 3 of the 4 things that they ask Gentiles to do have to do with food, and probably eating food sacrificed to idols. And so that's sort of a non-issue for Christians living in the 21st century. But for a Jew living in the Maccabean world, this was a do or die issue. You would not defile yourself with this food. Think even all the way back to Daniel. Daniel refused to defile himself with food that had been sacrificed to idols. Perhaps it was unclean food as well. So as Christianity spread into Gentile areas, just the fact that Jews and Gentiles would sit down and share a meal together was extremely controversial. Read Galatians 2. Peter had formerly ate with Gentiles, and he withdrew from that table fellowship. I doubt that the issue was the food that was being eaten. It was the person who you were sharing the food with that was controversial in that case. So she is going to she goes back to her bedroom, and she has a visionary experience, and she is going to completely convert to Judaism, and she'll get rid of her gods. She won't have anything to do with her gods, and she will no longer eat food that is unclean or sacrificed to idols. So that visionary experience, this is in chapters 14 through 17, this shows that Joseph's or Asenath's conversion was genuine, and it is really a strange strange sequence of events. I have some of the points there in the subpoints there. In this vision, she sees a man who is very much like Joseph. Joseph, I think, when you read this story, is described almost in messianic terms. He's almost like an angel. But what she sees is Joseph, but he's shining with the light of the sun, and he's overwhelmed. And then the person says, have courage, dress yourself, be ready. Her prayers have been heard, and she has been accepted by God. And then Asenath invites him to sit in her bed, which is sort of interesting because they make the point no one has ever sat in her bed except her. And so she prepares a meal for him, and he specifically asks for a honeycomb. And Asenath says there isn't any left, but this honeycomb sort of appears here, and it becomes almost like, I don't want to say a communion or a Last Supper, but this food represents her full conversion. So I'm going to read from, this is the pseudepigrapha, my translation that I have here of it. So the man is, he's made this food appear. I think I'll go all the way back to chapter 16, verse 12. The man smiled at Asenath's understanding and called her to himself, and stretched out his right hand and grasped her head and shook her head with his right hand. And Asenath was afraid of the man's hand, because sparks shot forth from his hand as bubbling melted iron. And Asenath looked, gazing with her eyes at the man's hand. And the man saw it and smiled. Happy are you. It's almost like a beatitude there. Blessed are you, Asenath, because of the ineffable mysteries of the Most High have been revealed to you. Happy are all who attach themselves to the Lord in repentance, because they will eat from his comb, honeycomb. And this honeycomb is full of the spirit of life. And the bees of paradise and of delight have made this from the dew of the roses of life that are in the paradise of God. And all the angels of God eat of it, and all the chosen of God and the sons of the Most High, because this is the honeycomb of life, and everyone who eats of it will not die forever and ever. So the food that she has from this angelic being, is a honeycomb, and it's a honeycomb made by bees in heaven. So the bees in heaven went to the roses in heaven, they made the honey, and so all the angels in heaven eat this. So he stretches out his hand, breaks off a small portion of the honeycomb, and he ate it himself. And what was left he put into his hand and then into Asenath's mouth, and said to her, Eat. And she ate. And the man said to Asenath, Behold, you have eaten the bread of life, and drunk the cup of immortality, and have been anointed with the ointment of incorruptibility. Today, but behold, from today, your flesh will flourish like flowers from the ground of the Most High, and your bones will grow strong like the cedars of paradise, of the delight of the Most High. So you have these, because you've eaten this food, you're saved. It almost sounds like, and if people first began studying this, it almost sounds like communion. Take this bread, take this cup, and sort of represents a person becoming saved. Well, I don't know if it's quite there, but whatever this angelic being gives her demonstrates that her conversion is genuine. So at that point in the strange vision, it's a confirmation she's a genuine convert. And at that point in the story, she comes back and explains to Joseph what has happened. She's had this experience, and now Joseph can take her as his wife. And so he's marrying a good Jewish girl, so to speak. So the second part of the book, I won't spend a whole lot of time on. It's a kind of a classic, almost like a Mordecai and Esther story, where there's a son of the Pharaoh who's made a plot to kill his father and take over because he's lost. He wanted to marry Asenath, and so he wants to take revenge and kill off Joseph. And so there's this sort of court intrigue story. But kind of the thing I want to conclude with is that Joseph and Asenath reflect sort of a struggle that began, I would say, maybe during this period, the Maccabean revolt for sure, definitely goes through into the first century of the New Testament period. Could a Gentile convert to Judaism? Well, the answer is always yes. If you go back to the Old Testament, there's plenty of places where either a Gentile could convert to Judaism, or there's a prophetic announcement that in the eschatological age, Gentiles will convert to Judaism. But yes, you can convert, but that conversion requires a change of practice. The Gentile convert has to stop certain behaviors that are sort of typical of pagans. In this book, it happens to be eating food sacrificed to idols. But that might be other things. Certainly you wouldn't worship the foreign gods anymore. You wouldn't go up to the temple to worship anymore. As it works out in the book of Maccabees, which we'll see next week, that will also require perhaps circumcision for the males, and certainly Sabbath worship. That's not the concern of this book. It's more food that's the issue here. But it's interesting that when you get to the New Testament, Gentiles eating food that is sacrificed to idols or is unclean is a huge controversial point. So Joseph and Asenath, 100 years before Christ, are dealing with issues that we will be dealing with in the book of Acts, the book of Galatians chapter 2, Romans 14 and 15, off and on in the Corinthians letters as well. Perhaps some Jews appeared to have been uncomfortable eating with Gentiles. We know that in the Gospels, the Pharisees would never have eaten with a Gentile. That's just not going to happen. I doubt Jesus and the 12 would have been comfortable eating with Gentiles. The fact that Jesus eats with tax collectors, prostitutes, and other sinners is controversial enough. If Jesus had sat down with a centurion and shared his food, that would have been a huge issue. So you get people like Cornelius in Acts 10. He's a Gentile, but he is a Gentile God-fearer. See that word on the screen. That refers to an almost convert. Cornelius probably kept Sabbath, probably kept the food laws. The only really thing stopping him from fully converting was submitting to circumcision. So he was given this category, and there were probably several of these in most synagogues. It's a Gentile person living as much like a Jew as possible, and the food was something that they needed to refrain from eating the unclean food. So Joseph and Asenath deals with this issue of whether a Gentile can convert. Well, of course, they can convert. But there's more than just a love story here. It's not just a legend. It's not just somebody trying to decide, hey, there's a name here. Let's write a novel and get rich off of people buying our love story. This is an attempt to decide to describe how a Gentile can come to faith in the God of Israel, and that just has to require some change of behavior. Now, as we'll see in the New Testament, those are very controversial things. So that's Joseph and Asenath. In the next lecture, I'll talk about a third example and another response to the rise of Hellenism. That's the story of Judith.